Hi everyone, my name is Michaela. Thanks for coming to book club today. I thought that we would start with Turtles All the Way Down, which I have right here. It's by John Green. I really love his work, so I thought that this would be a nice book to start off with for the first book for this channel. I read about half of it and then got so busy with my life that I didn't have time to come back to it until now. But I really loved what I read, so I thought that it would be cool to jump back in. So yeah. Chapter 1. At the time I first realized I might be fictional, my weekdays were spent at a publicly funded institution on the north side of Indianapolis called White River High School, where I was required to eat lunch at a particular time, between 12:37 p.m. and 1:14 p.m., by forces so much larger than myself that I couldn't even begin to identify them. If those forces had given me a different lunch period, or if the table mates who helped author my fate had chosen a different topic of conversation that September day, I would have met a quite different end, or at least a different middle. But I was beginning to learn that your life is a story told about you, not one that you tell. That's the first paragraph of this book. I just wanted to stop there, start with a little bit of commentary. I've always loved the way that John Green opens his books. I think that somehow he always starts with just something weird that gets your attention. I mean, what a great first line. At the time I first realized I might be fictional. It's just like such a weird thing to say. Of course, you pretend to be the author. You have to. You think, I now choose to go to lunch, when the monotone beep rings from on high at 12:37, but really, the bell decides. You think you're the painter, but you're the canvas. Hundreds of voices were shouting over one another in the cafeteria, so that the conversation became mere sound, the rushing of a river over rocks, and as I sat beneath fluorescent cylinders spewing aggressively artificial light, I thought about how we all believed ourselves to be the hero of some personal epic, when in fact we were basically identical organisms, colonizing a vast and windowless room that smelled of Lysol and lard. I was eating a peanut butter and honey sandwich and drinking a Dr. Pepper. To be honest, I find the whole process of masticating plants and animals and then shoving them down my esophagus kind of disgusting, so I was trying not to think about the fact that I was eating, which is a form of thinking about it. Across the table from me, Michael Turner was scribbling in a yellow paper notebook. Our lunch table was like a long running play on Broadway. The cast changed over the years, but the roles never did. Michael was the artsy one. He was talking with Daisy Ramirez, who had played the role of my best and most fearless friend since elementary school, but I couldn't follow their conversation over the noise of all the others. What was my part in this play? The sidekick. I was Daisy's friend, or Miss Holmes' daughter. I was somebody's something. I felt my stomach begin to work on the sandwich, and even over everybody's talking I could hear it digesting, all the bacteria chewing the slime of peanut butter. The students inside of me eating at my internal cafeteria. A shiver convulsed through me. "Didn't you go to camp with him?" Daisy asked me. "With who?" "Daisy Pickett," she said. "Yeah," I said. Why? Aren't you listening? Daisy asked. I am listening, I thought, to the cacophony of my I am listening, I thought, to the cacophony of my digestive tract. Of course, I'd long known that I was playing host to a massive collection of parasitic organisms, but I didn't much like being reminded of it. By cell count, humans are approximately 50% microbial, meaning that about half of the cells that make you up are not yours at all. There are something like 1,000 times more microbes living in my particular biome than there are human beings on Earth, and it often seems like I can feel them living and breeding and dying in and on me. I wipe my sweaty palms on my jeans and try to control my breathing. Admittedly, I have some anxiety problems, but I would argue it isn't irrational to be concerned about the fact that you are a skin-encased bacterial colony. Michael said. His dad was about to be arrested for bribery or something, but the night before the raid he disappeared. There's a $100,000 reward out for him. And you know this kid, Daisy said. Knew him, I answered. I watched Daisy attack her school-provided rectangular pizza and green beans with a fork. She kept glancing up at me, her eyes widening as if to say, well? I could tell she wanted me to ask her about something, but I couldn't tell what, because my stomach wouldn't shut up, which was forcing me deep inside a worry that I'd somehow contracted a parasitic infection. I could half hear Michael telling Daisy about his new art project, in which he was using Photoshop to average the faces of 100 people named Michael. And the average of their faces would be this new 101st Michael, which was an interesting idea, and I wanted to listen, but the cafeteria was so loud and I couldn't stop wondering whether there was something wrong with the microbial balance of power inside of me. Excessive abdominal noise is an uncommon, but not unprecedented, presenting symptom of infection with the bacteria Clostridium difficile. Something long and scientific, which can be fatal. I pulled out my phone and searched human microbiome to reread Wikipedia's introduction to the trillions of microorganisms currently inside of me. I clicked over to the article about C. diff, scrolling to the part about how C. diff infections occur in hospitals. I scrolled down farther to a list of symptoms, none of which I had, except for the excessive abdominal noises, although I knew from previous searches that the Cleveland Clinic had reported the case of one person who died of C. diff after presenting at the hospital with only abdominal pain and fever. I reminded myself that I didn't have a fever, and myself replied, "You don't have a fever yet." This is so interesting. I remember before the book came out and like when it was coming out, everyone was talking. Sorry, the genie. It's my dog. Everyone was talking about how the book was about anxiety and OCD, which I believe John Green personally has dealt with. So reading this is so interesting to me because I've studied OCD and anxiety and stuff like that in all of my psychology classes in college, and it's always so different, you know, when you're learning about the real thing after you've heard so many stereotypes, and especially surrounding OCD, there's a lot of stereotypes and people joke about it a lot, and they think that it's just about like washing your hands too much or something like that, especially like I hear older people joke about it more often, but it really is, it can be a really big problem for people to deal with, and I think that John Green wrote it so well, and he wrote this character so well, and I think that allowing us to read this in first person actually teaches us a lot about what it's like to be inside of the mind of someone dealing with this. Because even though it's different for every person, I just think it helps to understand more about how the stereotypes really don't tend to match the truth of what people are actually going through with this. So, yeah. At the cafeteria, where a shrinking slice of my consciousness still resided, Daisy was telling Michael that his averaging project shouldn't be about people named Michael, but about imprisoned men who'd later been exonerated. It'll be easier anyway, she said, because they all have smug shots taken from the same angle. And then it's not just about names, but about race and class and mass incarceration. And Michael was like, "You're a genius, Daisy." And she said, "You sound surprised." And meanwhile, I was thinking that if half the cells inside of me are not you, doesn't that challenge the whole notion of me as a singular pronoun, let alone as the author of my fate? And I fell pretty far down that recursive wormhole until it transported me completely out of the White River High School cafeteria into some non-sensorial place only properly crazy people get to visit. Ever since I was little, I pressed my right thumbnail into the finger pad of my middle finger, and so now there's this weird callus over my fingerprint. After so many years of doing this, I can open up a crack in the skin really easily. So I cover it up with a Band-Aid to try to prevent infection. But sometimes I get worried that there already is an infection, and so I need to drain it. And the only way to do that is to reopen the wound and press out any blood that will come. Once I start thinking about splitting the skin apart, I literally cannot not do it. I apologize for the double negative, but it's a real double negative of a situation. A bind from which negating the negation is truly the only escape. So anyway, I started to want to feel my thumbnail biting into the skin of my finger pad, and I knew that resistance was more or less futile, so beneath the cafeteria table, I slipped the Band-Aid off my finger and dug my thumbnail into the calloused skin until I felt the crack open. "Holmesy?" David said. I looked up at her. "We're almost through lunch and you haven't even mentioned my hair." She shook out her hair, with so red they were pink highlights. Right, she'd dyed her hair. I swum up out of the depths and said, "It's bold." "I know, right? It says, 'Ladies and gentlemen,' and also people who do not identify as ladies or gentlemen, Daisy Ramirez won't break her promises, but she will break your heart." Daisy's self-proclaimed life motto was break hearts, not promises. She kept threatening to get it tattooed on her ankle. When she turned 18, Daisy turned back to Michael, and I to my thoughts. Daisy turned back to Michael, and I to my thoughts. The stomach grumbling had grown, if anything, louder. I felt like I might vomit. For someone who actively dislikes bodily fluids, I throw up quite a lot. "Holmesy, you okay?" Daisy asked, and I nodded. Sometimes I wondered why she liked me, or at least tolerated me. Why any of them did. Even I found myself annoying. I could feel sweat sprouting from my forehead, and once I begin to sweat, it's impossible to stop. I'll keep sweating for hours, and not just my face or my armpits. My neck sweats, my boobs sweat, my calves sweat, Maybe I did have a fever. Beneath the table, I slipped the old Band-Aid into my pocket and, without looking, pulled out a new one, unwrapped it, and then glanced down to apply it to my finger. All the while, I was breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, in the manner advised by Dr. Karen Syme, exhaling at a pace that would make a candle flicker but not go out. Imagine the candle, Asa, flickering from your breath but still there, always there. So I tried that, but the thought spiral kept tightening anyway. I could hear Dr. Syme saying I shouldn't get out my phone, that I mustn't look up the same questions over and over, but I got it out anyway, and I reread the Human Microbiota Wikipedia article. The thing about a spiral is, if you follow it inward, it never actually ends. It just keeps tightening infinitely. She's such an interesting character to read, and sometimes it almost feels like hard to read her, especially out loud. I almost feel sometimes like reading this like she's just like taking us with us. Wait, hold on. Like she's taking us with her down this spiral. It's almost, I think, chill-inducing. But it's also just interesting being able to, like, point out how it's almost subtle. Like, it's obviously there, but John Green almost makes it subtle in the way he shows her symptoms, her OCD symptoms, like reading the articles over and over and over again, even though she already has read them a bunch of times, or the need to like open her finger back up because she's so worried it could be infected, even though it's almost like she knows it's not. But anxiety and OCD go like right hand in hand, and I guess that's like the real thing, like reading for her. Like I can feel her anxiety. It's just like so interesting being put right in her shoes so skillfully. John Green knows exactly what he's doing. He's so good. I sealed the Ziploc bag around the last quarter of my sandwich, got up, and tossed it into an overfilled trash can. I heard a voice from behind me. How concerned should I be that you haven't said more than 2 words in a row all day? Thought spiral, I mumbled in reply. Daisy had known me since we were 6, long enough to get it. I figured, sorry, man. Let's hang out today. This girl Molly walked up to us, smiling, and said, Daisy, just FYI, your Kool-Aid hair job is staining your shirt. Daisy looked down at her shoulders, and indeed, her striped top had turned pink in spots. She flinched for a second, then straightened her spine. Yeah, it's part of the look, Molly. Stained shirts are huge in Paris right now. She turned away from Molly and said, Right, so we'll go to your house and watch Star Wars Rebels. Daisy was really into Star Wars, and not just the movies, but also the books and the animated shows and the kids' shows where they're all made out of Legos. Like, she wrote fan fiction about Chewbacca's love life. And we will improve your mood until you are able to say 3 or even 4 words in a row. Sound good? Sound good. Sounds good. And then you can take me to work. Sorry, but I need a ride. Okay. I wanted to say more, but the thoughts kept coming, unbidden and unwanted. If I'd been the author, I would have stopped thinking about my microbiome. I would have told Daisy how much I liked her idea for Michael's art project, and I would have told her that I did remember Davis Pickett, that I remembered being 11 and carrying a vague but constant fear. I would have told her that I remembered once at camp laying next to Davis on the edge of a dock, our legs dangling over, our backs against the rough-hewn planks of wood, staring together up at the cloudless summer sky. I would have told her that Davis and I never talked much or even looked at each other, but it didn't matter because we were looking at the same sky together, which is maybe more intimate than eye contact anyway. Anybody can look at you. It's quite rare to find someone who sees the same world you see. Alright, and that's the end of the first chapter. The other thing that I really like about this book is the mystery, which we haven't really gotten into very much yet, but just for a moment. But I really like Daisy. I think she's a fun character. She kind of reminds me of Joan Green's character, Margot, just a little bit from Paper Towns. Maybe not quite as wild, but she is bold, and I think that it was a good idea to include her in the story because I think that I think that Aza needs that in her life at the very least. And I also just think that she's understanding since they've known each other so long, which is also nice to see. And I also just think that it was really nice how at the end of the chapter he showed that Daisy was a really supportive person. So yeah, that was the first chapter. I'm excited to read the second. I want to know what you guys think. Unfortunately, I'm not so great at reading the scientific words, so please bear with me on that one. But I look forward to seeing you guys in the next chapter. So if you are interested in being in the book club, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any chapters. And I'd also love for people to comment and kind of tell me what they think. And I think especially with this book, it has a lot of personal connections for people. And it really is, I think, such a special book. And I think it was well worth waiting for it. So, yeah, tell me what you guys think. See you next time.